Big card coming live to us from Perth, Australia this weekend. You excited?
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. Pretty solid pay-per-view card. Obviously, a little bit top heavy in terms of name value. And I mean, some of the matchups like lower on the card, maybe not the most quality fighters in terms of technical ability, but I really like the matchmaking here. Should be a lot of finishes, a lot of bangers, a lot of knockouts. So yeah, definitely one to look forward to down under here.
Yeah, and I am excited for this card. I agree with you as we go from top to bottom here. Things are going to get a little shakier, but we'll start off with what is an awesome main event, a potential that we see yet another double champion in the UFC as Alexander Volkanovski moves up from featherweight to challenge Islam Makhachev for the lightweight title. This is an interesting fight. I mean, for Islam, it's tough to pick just about anyone against him. He sits as a minus 400 right now against a champion in Alexander Volkanovski that has won 22 fights in a row, has looked incredible. His most recent performances, the Max Holloway trilogy, as well as beating the Korean Zombie the way he did. It's just tough to see him as a 3-1 dog against anyone. But Makhachev, just the way he fights, his style, the wrestling that he's been training since birth, it seems. It just makes him it gives him such potential to be a long reigning and dominant champion, like his longtime training partner Habib was in this division. So it's an interesting fight. I mean, Volkanovski, if anyone is to beat Makhachev, I think he has the tools to do so. It's just tough seeing a path to victory for him here with the stylistic matchup. You'd figure Volk needs to, keep his high volume, heavy on the leg kicks early, heavy on the pressure, keep this fight standing. It's just Makhachev does so well, getting to the body, getting his takedowns when needed. And we saw in his title match against Charles Oliveira, too, his hands have come a long way. So it's a tough proposition betting to him. I will get a little more in depth into this matchup, but first I'd like to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, personally for me, I'm on the Islam side here. I like Volk a lot. You know, I'm a big Max Holloway fan, but after that last fight, I just can't help but consider Volk one of the best fighters in the world. He's ranked number one pound for pound. Take pound for pound with a grain of salt. Obviously, it's just a collection of opinions at the end of the day. But this is an opportunity to actually see two of the top pound for pound fighters in the world fighting each other. In many ways, it is a striker versus grappler matchup. I will say Volk's grappling's underrated. Islam's striking is underrated. But at the same time, I think the gap in wrestling is going to be greater than the gap in striking here. The line does feel a little bit ridiculous just considering how good Volkanovski is. Like, he shouldn't be that big of an underdog against anyone. But when you factor in Islam's wrestling, which is obviously the class of the world out of Dagestan, 65% takedown accuracy is just a ridiculous rate, especially knowing that all his opponents are just waiting to defend that takedown. That's just an unbelievable percentage throughout his UFC tenure. And then, yeah, I mean, Volk, obviously one of the best on the feet, but I do think Islam can kind of use those kicks, use some of those rangy attacks to at least gain respect from Volkanovski and close that distance. Maybe Volk packs a little bit more power in his punches moving up a weight class here, but other than that, there's really no benefit to him moving up in weight. He's very short for a lightweight, which is where this fight's taking place at 5'6". I know their reaches are listed similarly, but Islam does throw a lot of kicks, so I don't really think that's true necessarily in this spot. Makhachev's also a southpaw, which should give Volk some interesting looks on the feet. But obviously, the path here for Makhachev is to take this fight to the ground early and often. If Volk gets back to his feet, which wouldn't shock me, take him down again, take him down again, take him down again. Father's plan. I mean, it's just so cut and dry to me. And when this fight was announced, I said, hey, I really think Islam probably slices through him. I still feel that way. I'm probably going to bet Islam inside the distance, which is close to even money. Obviously, a much better number than that minus 300 we're seeing around most books. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. If Volkanovski in his home country, he's pretty much fighting in his backyard. The crowd's definitely going to be on his side here, but just stylistically and the size, I don't know. I just have trouble seeing him doing it. We saw Islam caught very early in his career where he was knocked out in that UFC debut. It's been years though. He's not the same fighter anymore. He obviously has that nutrition down pat. this is a guy who spends millions on his fight camps. Like LeBron broke the scoring record last night. That's a guy who spends millions on his own body. We're seeing that out of Islam, and most of these UFC fighters can't keep up with that. Even the other champions that are making a lot of money, they're not investing in their careers the same way Makhachev is. And I don't know. I know Khabib's not going to be in his corner, but they've been on calls every day. I've heard in interviews, so I'm not really concerned there. And yeah, I don't think Volk's gonna have to worry much about a weight cut here, but Islam pretty much seems to have that down as well. He looks great when you watch the UFC embedded videos. So I don't know. Would it shock me if Volk pulled off the upset? No, he's that good of a fighter. But at the same time, I think just thinking logically and looking at the way these guys match up, Islam's the pick. I mean, we've seen guys like Brian Ortega take Volk down, Max Holloway take him down. Obviously, he wasn't expecting it from Max, so it's not really the same thing. But Mendes got him down a few times. Obviously, a good wrestler, but none of these guys can even touch Islam. And Islam, I mean, this is a guy who's going to be cutting down from like 175, 180 pounds. This is not the same matchup. I just think it's going to be tough for him. I know it's the big cage, but at the same time, I don't know that that's really going to be a big factor here. I think Islam closes the distance. There's a reason Khabib called for this fight immediately after they beat Oliveira. I think he knows this is the time to kind of capitalize on this and get that #1 pound for pound spot, and then just defend it for the rest of his career. So I like Islam here. I'll probably tie him into parlays. Really easy hedge spot as the last fight on the card. You just throw a little bit of money on Volk if you can hit the other legs to that, and then yeah, I'd probably betting Islam inside. I do think he can win via submission. We saw Volk break that choke from Ortega. He was also in what was it? A triangle as well in that fight. Two really close submissions. Ortega has great jiu-jitsu, but he's nowhere near as strong as Islam Makhachev. So I'm on Makhachev here. I think he gets it done.
Yeah, and I mean, it's Chad Mendes, but really no other wrestlers at featherweight that Volkanovski has had to deal with. He closes the distance with his combinations. He moves in fast. He gets in the pocket, and that's where most of his, power shots are landing. And that's just not going to be a path to victory against Islam Makhachev, who's so successful with the takedown, has great sambo. It's just going to be really tough for him to keep this on the feet for prolonged periods of time. The shorter man, he's going to have good get-ups, and we've seen his ability to escape submission. So I don't see this being like a super one-sided, even if Makhachev is going to win, convincingly. I'm not sure if the finish will materialize. If it's a full 20 minutes of beating down on Volkanovski, I think it is going to be a messier fight than one where Makhachev would be able to secure a submission. I think Volkanovski is going to look the fresher fighter in a fourth and a fifth round, despite the great cardiovascular, that Makhachev has and all his strength and conditioning training. It is just a fight. I would be skeptical betting the inside, but I agree with you. I agree with the odds makers. It's hard to go against Makhachev, especially, bullying a guy down a weight versus any of the top lightweights. I'll say again, this is tougher than any of the top 15 lightweights Makhachev has in front of him. I mean, I do think so, but we will see. This is just a spot that at even plus 300, it's tough to get excited about Volkanovski becoming double champ.
Just one more thing. For anyone looking to back Volkanovski, there is one good reason to like him here. He spent this whole camp with Craig Jones, who's one of the best jiu-jitsu grapplers in the world. Really strong grappler, really good wrestler. Still don't think he's on Islam's level, though. Everyone who ends up wrestling with Islam, they're just shocked by his strength. Everyone says he's stronger than Khabib. And just those Dagestani wrestlers, it's impossible to really mimic that. But I do like that he brought in Craig Jones for this camp. There's probably no one else better in the world than a Khabib type himself. So I do like that for Volk. But at the same time, yeah, I think it's Islam all day and still.
Yeah, and I tend to agree here in this spot. While Volkanovski is to come up short, he will still be featherweight champion and looking to defend his belt against the winner of the interim title, who will be fighting in the co-main event. It is Yair Rodriguez, sitting at minus 145 against Josh Emmett. Here, I mean, two deserving contenders. I mean, there's some other big names at featherweight: Max Holloway, Arnold Allen. They're going to be duking it out, but I mean, these two have earned their way to a title shot. Yair was very impressive in his fight against Max Holloway. I think that's a bit of the reason why he's favored in this spot here, and that's why I am leaning his way. He's just going to be the better technical striker compared to Emmett in this fight. He has the advantage of length, but also just his hand speed, the combinations he puts together makes me lean his way while this fight is on the feet. Josh Emmett, I mean, incredible power. I picked him in his last fight against Calvin Kattar just mainly as a value at the number where it's sat. He closed it better than a 2-1 dog, and I just feel like two like featherweights close in level of technical skill could go either way. Whereas here, I do see a more divisive, skill difference between the two athletes, and Rodriguez is sitting a smaller favorite than Kattar was in that bout. We've seen both men tested for 5 rounds. This is going to be a 5-round fight, but I do lean Rodriguez the later this fight goes. Again, Emmett is going to be looking primarily to use his power overhand in order to close this thing out. And, while he's looked tremendous on this run, I'm not sure he's going to catch Rodriguez or surprise him with anything he's seen against the higher level competition he's faced. Both guys have shared the cage with a lot of, top tier featherweights, but Yair has performed better against the majority of them. And I see him getting it done in the spot. My only real concerns, he is going to be a lot skinnier when you see these two locked in the cage come Saturday night. Visible size difference between these two. Emmett is bulked up at 145, and we will see how it looks here. And then he also just landed in Australia on Tuesday. I'm not sure how long Emmett has been there, but just one concern, Mexico, off to Australia. Not sure how drastic that's going to be, but just landing on Tuesday gives me a little pause. I probably will be betting him here though at the number. And my apologies, it has swelled from a minus 145 now up to 180, 190 in a majority of places.
Yeah, man, I'm with you. I think Yair is the better striker here. There's just a few concerns in backing him. Number one, I mean, I think Emmett has a pretty clear path here if he leans on his wrestling. And we say this about Emmett all the time, and he just never seems to really go after it. He averages just over 1 takedown per 15 minutes. He's going to be the better grappler in this matchup, especially offensively. I think he can control Yair on the mat for extended periods of time. I just have no faith in him kind of executing that game plan. So it's really tough for me to back Emmett for that reason. And then Yair, I mean, he looked a lot better in the Max fight. He came out aggressive. But he's known to be a very slow starter. And I think against Max and against Ortega, we kind of see him turning that corner. This is a guy who's always had the ability. He's always had that technical, I mean, everything you look for back to when he was on The Ultimate Fighter. Like, you knew this guy was special, but he's always just been very egotistical, very full of himself. I think it's good he's been a little bit humbled over the past couple of years. But at the same time, man, I just don't ever feel great about him kind of executing a smart game plan. Like, we just see him wait for fights that come to him, and against someone like Emmett, that could be very, very dangerous because obviously Emmett has that one-shot power. To me, this is maybe the hardest fight on the card to call. I like Yair. I'm with you. I'm leaning him right now. I do want to spend more time filming this one, though. I like going back to even earlier matchups. I mean, Emmett's just going to be kind of chasing that powerful right hands. I think Yair has the more creative striking, but at the same time, Emmett is really sound defensively. He doesn't wear damage very well, very thin skin. We saw that in the Kattar fight, a fight he won where his eye was completely shut. Looked terrible coming out of that fight, but the judges still gave it to him. I mean, it kind of depends on the judges which way that fight goes. We could see something similar here. Maybe you bet the split decision prop, honestly. Like, this kind of feels like that type of fight. I think if there is a finish, it's more likely to be Emmett finishing Yair. But yeah, I mean, all the technical advantages other than maybe the rest and go to Yair Rodriguez, and I don't really see Emmett leaning on that part of his game. So I'm leaning Yair currently. This is a fight that's been giving me fits. Already spent a couple hours watching both these guys fight this week. I just feel like I need to spend a couple more to feel really good about it. Maybe we see weigh-ins. One of these guys looks really sucked out. Obviously, Emmett cuts down a ton to get to featherweight. Yair does as well. Doesn't really fill out that frame as well as Emmett does. But at the same time, weigh-ins could be kind of enough for me to sway one way or the other here. Just a really, really close matchup. I think both guys have clear paths to victory. Yair, I really do think is the better technical fighter. I consider Emmett to have the higher fight IQ though, but I'm just not confident in him maybe leaning on wrestling in this spot. So as things stand, I'm leaning Yair, but this is a fight I just don't really want to bet on. Maybe the over on a round total, something like that. Otherwise, I'm just avoiding it for now.
Yeah, and we've seen Yair mix in the wrestling. I don't think these two are going to be in a rush to put this fight onto the mat. I think he could hold his own there, surely. But yeah, and if he would elect to go that route, would certainly have a better chance of success. I do feel like if this fight goes late, if this fight goes to decision, it is going to be Yair, mainly due to the volume that he puts out, just slightly higher than Emmett. but landing at a much more accurate clip with his offensive strike, something the judges should visibly see. And while Emmett could steal moments, steal rounds with big shots in this fight, I'm not certain he's going to find the chin of Rodriguez to put him out, and that's why I feel like at the current odds he is the play for me. But should be a great fight. Should be an awesome featherweight interim title bout, and whoever gets the chance to step in there with Volkanovski next should be a good one.
Yeah, I think Volk rolls through either of them personally. I see Islam beating Volk here, Volk going back down to 145, beating the winner of this, and then beating the winner of Max Allen pretty easily. So I don't know. I don't love this jump up for Volk. I just think it's not great timing, in my opinion. He should have just picked Yair Emmett, fought him here, defended the title on his home turf, and felt great about it. Obviously, you got to commend the guy for going for that upper weight class and going for that second belt. But to me, man, I don't know. Just doesn't seem like great timing. But
I think this decision was made prior to Charles Oliveira losing the belt, and that made
you saw the way he sliced through Charles, maybe, yeah. And then he got called out that night in the crowd, so you kind of have to go for it at that point. But yeah, it's tricky.
Yeah. Well, we will move on now to the featured bout. This is going to be a good one. At welterweight, Jack Della Maddalena back in action, facing Randy Brown, sitting a minus 330 favorite, and I cannot get enough of Jack Della Maddalena. I mean, dude's a savage. Dude is landing 8.45 significant strikes per minute since joining the UFC. He's had 3 straight wins by first-round knockout inside, the first 4 minutes of each of those bouts. Just picking dudes apart. I mean, Ramazan Ameev to the body of Danny Roberts. He's just so good at mixing it up. Such crisp boxing. Here against Randy Brown, a guy with a good reach advantage and someone who uses it well. I still see him just looking far superior on the feet. Early in fights, Magdalena is poised, but he does take an aggressive approach, and he just mixes in the power shot so well that it's going to be tough to beat this guy for any prolonged period standing. And Randy Brown is not the type of guy who's going to go in, get 2 takedowns around, and get him off his game. So this looks like a pretty easy matchup for Della Maddalena here in Australia. I think this is a bit of a showcase fight for him, and while Randy Brown's tough, well, he's a live opponent. This should be one where he cruises, just the far more technical striker of the two.
Yeah, I mostly agree with you and everything you're saying. I am on the Della Maddalena side. I will say, though, the line is getting a little bit out of hand. I mean, we've seen Jack beat Ameev. He's coming off a win over Danny Roberts, but Randy Brown's definitely faced better competition. He's on a 4-fight win streak. We've seen him win a few fights by submission, so we know he at least has that in his tool belt. But yeah, I'm with you. I do see Della Maddalena as the more technical striker. I think he'll be able to close distance on a very long Brown, kind of bait him into traps and use his feints to kind of set up his power shots. Averaging nearly 9 significant strikes landed per minute. That's just a ridiculous rate. Brown, kind of known as a slow starter, doesn't always put out the volume you want to see from him. So I agree with you. I do think this is kind of a showcase spot, but when we're getting over minus 300 into the minus 400 territory now, and the best win on Della Maddalena's record is a Ramazan Ameev, it's just a little bit scary to get too heavily invested. I think, though, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to flip my pick or anything on value like we do sometimes. I still very clearly want to pick Della Maddalena here. I'll probably tie him into a lot of parlays. Looking back to the Vicente Luque fight, those two guys standing, exchanging in the pocket, we did see Brown eventually starched and go out. We've seen him KO'd from Nico Price on the ground at times, so maybe not the most durable fighter. He faced a power puncher in Chaos Williams, but he did a really good job just kind of circling away from the power, keeping very long distance. But Williams just isn't the technical striker on Maddalena's level. Certainly has the power, but to set up that power is why I think Della Maddalena gets it done here. Probably inside the distance, which you're getting a much better number on. So even if he doesn't hit that, you're taking much less of a risk at that number. I got to take a look at it. I think I don't think it's plus money anymore, but still, rather than paying over minus 300, tying him into all your parlays, maybe just put a nice little wager on him inside the distance. Brown not known to be the most durable, but I do think he's getting a little bit disrespected on the money line.
Yeah, and I mean, I would even go as far to say first 2 rounds is going to be the spot Della Maddalena gets this done. It's been first round knockout, first round knockout, first round knockout. Brown may be able to survive a bit longer than that, but I do see this being pretty one-sided if it is to stay on the feet. And Della Maddalena is going to be one of my favorite bets on the card. I don't think 300 is awful for this. I mean, again, Randy Brown, very live dog, just not a spot I think he's going to find success. He's not going to be the one to, stop this little run Della Maddalena's been on, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I just think, I mean, sometimes we just got to take a long look at the number, and to see Brown kind of, I don't know, such a heavy underdog against the guy who they are trying to build, it just gives me some pause. I mean, like earlier, like before the pandemic, you would never see a line like this on a fight. With a similar matchup like this. Like obviously the markets have adjusted and books are kind of covering themselves now. Like they can identify these positions where the UFC is trying to build someone, but you're lacking value for that reason. So I do like it. I just think I would try to find an angle to bet it inside the distance and get a better price.
All right, moving on now. Heavyweight matchup between Justin Tafa and Parker Porter. Tafa sitting a slight favorite right now, minus 125, minus 130. With Porter coming back at plus 110. What are your thoughts on this matchup?
My first thought is this shouldn't be on the main card. It's just like, why is this on a pay-per-view card? Parker Porter, I think you just called him Porker by mistake. He's a funny looking guy. I mean, he's very heavy. He's not a tall heavyweight. He doesn't look athletic at all. But at the same time, I do think he has a grappling advantage here. He's going to be very slow in striking exchanges. Tafa does have deceptive speed. I think he's much more likely to knock out Porter than Porter is to knock him out. But at the same time, it's not going to shock me if Porter can grind Tafa up against the cage, make this a boring fight, mix in a few takedowns. Once he gets that huge body on top of you, it's very tough to get up. And I mean, Tafa's shown 100% takedown defense in the UFC, but he really hasn't faced anyone who even tries to take him down. So I like Porter here slightly as an underdog. I'm not really confident in the play. I don't feel like the UFC would put Toff on the main card in front of his hometown to lose. But at the same time, I mean, I got to do some digging and try to see if Toffa can defend the takedown or not. Because if he can't, this is going to be a very, very ugly and boring fight. One that people are going to watch and say, man, like, why was that on a pay-per-view? Why did I just pay for that? Like we said earlier, this is a top-heavy card. I think this is the main reason for that narrative. I'm currently leaning Porter. Not the best takedown accuracy, around 30%, but he is going to pursue them. We have seen his cardio hold up for 15 minutes time and time again. I mean, again, looking at this guy's body, you would not think it, but he can carry that weight into late rounds. He can still shoot for takedowns. And if Tafa, I don't know, has an adrenaline dump or something like that, he could be in trouble. But like I said, at the same time, on the feet, Tafa is going to be the better striker. He's a southpaw. Porter hasn't had too many of those looks. Tafa much faster in his strikes, those really powerful kicks. I think he could even hit a head kick or something on Porter here if he can get it off early. But yeah, it's either going to be Tafa kind of just styling on Porter in the striking, or a very boring grinding decision by Parker Porter where the crowd is booing for 15 minutes. And I'm kind of leaning with the latter. So yeah, I'm leaning Parker Porter here, but I want to do a bit more digging. If suddenly it seems like Toph has decent takedown defense, maybe I just stick with him. But yeah, I don't know. It just seems a little crazy. They flew Porter out to Australia to maybe pull off an upset on this main card. Like that's kind of giving me pause, but at the same time, stylistically, I think he's the pick as an underdog.
Yeah, I agree with almost everything that you had said there. I mean, Tafa is going to be the better striker in this matchup. I'm kind of torn on it too. One would think Parker Porter as the underdog, probably the better look, just with that style grinding up against him. It's just, Tafa's got a big body too. I think he is going to defend takedowns in this spot, so it makes it a tough fight to call. I'm probably going to do a bit more digging myself, but I feel like Porter is probably the smarter choice of the two. It's just Tafa is going to be more live in the first half of this fight, and I could very well see him getting a finish like his last time out. So for my official pick on this fight, you will want to check out Dine Sports come Saturday morning. Our full write-up breakdown of every fight on the card, official prediction. But right now, I think I may be leaning with you, Parker Porter. Just not quite certain. Tough fight to call.
Yeah, it's really a tough fight to call. It's a low-level fight, honestly. These are not the best heavyweights on the roster by any stretch.
No, not quite. All right. And opening the main card, light heavyweight, Jimmy Crute here in Australia, facing off against Alonzo Menafield. Crute a pretty sizable favorite, minus 200, minus 190, going up against Alonzo Menafield here. It's an interesting bout. I've kind of had some trouble calling Crute fights here and there, as well as Menafield, just somebody that I have not had the best read on. I think in this bout, Crute is going to look better on the feet, and especially early on, I think this is a matchup where he can find success just keeping things at range against a Menafield that's not always known to push the pace. It is just Menafield is the more explosive of these two. Is going to land the bigger shots over the course of this fight. And I mean, if Crute elects to grapple as he has plenty in the past, I think he could find a lot of success just keeping Menafield down and, working on top in positions. It was just, I have seen before situations where he keeps the fight standing longer than he should. And in a situation here going up against Alonzo Menafield, I do not see that playing to great success. It's a close fight. It's a hard one to pick with these odds because while Crute will look all of a minus 200 if he's on top of Menafield the whole fight, I'm not certain that will be the case. So this one I'm a bit torn on too. May need your help in getting a solid pick here.
Yeah, I'm a big Jimmy Crute guy. I pick him a lot. I mean, it has burnt me in the past. We saw him, I don't know, who was that fight against where he got hurt? What's his name? Smith. Yeah, I mean, I picked him against Smith, who's like a top 5 lightweight in the world. I mean, we saw him going against Jamal Hill. I thought he had a decent chance there as well. Very talented kid, great prospect, really good jiu-jitsu, really wide range of submissions that he can hit on guys. But yeah, he has fallen a bit too in love with his striking, and I think that is what has been burning him his last few times out. But this is another spot where I think the UFC wants to build this kid. I mean, the light heavyweight division is pretty much wide open. There's a lot of kids on this roster right now that could very quickly climb up and get into contention pretty fast. We saw it with Jamal Hill. It only takes a few wins. Like Ryan Spawn all of a sudden is a win or two away from being in title conversation, which is just insane to me. But when you look at Menafield's wins, man, he beat that Askar Morozov guy who's like not a real fighter. He completely like defrauded the UFC into getting signed. He had a fight with Ed Herman that was closer than it should be. Beat Sharon, who got cut. Serkinov was on a huge losing streak, and I think the only reason this line's relatively close is Crute lost to Serkinov, but that was Serkinov when he was like still really juiced, a few years younger. So I'm not all that impressed that Menafield knocked him out last time out. So for me, I'm on Crute here. I think he's going to be able to at least hang on the feet long enough to close the distance, get those takedowns. 75% takedown accuracy, very, very high rate for a light heavyweight. I think he's one of the better grapplers in this division, averaging nearly 5 takedowns per 15 minutes. And Menafield, I mean, he does a good job grappling against these inferior wrestlers, but that's really not what he's going to be seeing here. I think Crute's going to be able to take him down, probably finish him via submission in the first or second round. I mean, he lost to William Knight. Devin Clark was ragdolling him, and yeah, I don't know, man. I'm just not all that impressed with Menafield. He's one of these guys. He looks the part. He looks like an NFL linebacker. He's absolutely massive. Obviously carries some decent power. Crute's been a little bit chinny, but it's just so clear. Like, if you're Jimmy Crute, don't stand and trade with this guy. Take him down, work for that submission. That takedown accuracy, like I said, is one of the best rates in the division, and I think it's a very clear path to victory for him here. And I have listened to a bunch of interviews. He seems very focused, seems very humbled as well. He was KO'd by Jamal Hill, who is now the champion of the UFC. So he doesn't feel too badly about that one, but it's nice to know that he's taking a step down here. And I just haven't been impressed by anything Menafield's done lately. Sure, he KO'd Serkinov. That was Serkinov's 4th loss in a row. And before that, like, to look for an impressive win on this guy's record, you're going back to Paul Craig in 2019. So I am on Crute here, pretty confident in him. Probably going to bet him inside the distance, but yeah, I think he's a solid play.
And yeah, I think you helped sell me. I mean, it is a good scrap, but Crute with the grappling advantage if he is going to elect to do so. Again, should look the part of a minus 200. So tend to agree. All right, moving on now, looking at the preliminary portion of the card. Tyson Pedro facing Modestas Bukauskas will be the featured prelim. This is a light heavyweight scrap. This is a pretty good one. I mean, Bukauskas had a nice run back, Cage Warriors, right? Won the championship there. And now his second stint in the UFC. But Tyson Pedro, since returning from a short hiatus, has been on a tear himself. Not facing the highest level of competition, but again, drawing into a light heavyweight opponent here that he should be able to get the win over in Bukauskas. I mean, Bukauskas pretty solid striking, just not that defensively sound. And if Pedro's going to spend time with him on the feet, I see him having a lot of success. He has great kicks, Tyson Pedro. He mixes things up well, good attacks from range. And against a long guy like Bukauskas, he's going to be able to match that. And, it's rare we see Bukauskas be kind of outsized or at least matched in terms of both height and reach in a matchup, where in this case he is going to be. Not to mention just the grappling advantage that Pedro is also going to have in this spot. We've seen him have a lot of success on the mat already in the UFC, as well as his career prior. Whereas Bukauskas has kind of been a guy that, when taken down, can get into situations where he's on the mat for prolonged periods against superior grapplers. So, I mean, I feel like at these odds of Pedro minus 230, 240 in some spots, he's going to be the side for me here. Fighting on home soil in front of a home crowd, should be able to get the win over a guy that's improved certainly since his first UFC stint, but not quite on the same level in my opinion. Modestas Bukauskas.
Yep, I'm totally with you. I faded Bukauskas in all 3 of his UFC fights before he was cut. He lost all 3. I've been on Pedro his last couple fights, obviously against even worse competition than he's seeing here, much worse competition than he's seeing here. But I'm all over Pedro here. I think he's going to be, he hasn't really been wrestling. Like, that's my one concern. He's a very good submission grappler for this division. But yeah, we saw against Villanueva and we saw against Hunsucker that he just stood up and beat him up on the feet. I think here the path is clear. Just take Bukauskas down, work him for that submission. It should come fairly easily. Bukauskas has some power, but to me, he's one of these guys that's more of an athlete than he is a fighter. He doesn't really mix things together well. Like, he's not very fluid at all, just very rigid in everything he does. In those Cage Warrior fights that he won, I mean, the Chadwick fight, good to get the win, but that was closer than it should have been, and it took him a while to get that KO on Campbell. Like, those are 2 fights he should have looked better in than I think he did. Another factor here, this fight is on very short notice. UFC originally had Pedro fighting Ming Yang Zhang, who was on the road to UFC. I don't know how or why. He was in upper weight class, so I'm a little bit confused by that one. But he was on one of those cards in his last win, so I think they were just trying to build Pedro up in this spot, and they said, hey, who can we build in, or who can we bring in? And Bukauskas coming off those nice Cage Warrior wins. This is your ticket back to the UFC. You got to take this fight, go to Australia, fight Tyson Pedro, and then you could maybe get an easier fight after that. So to me, it's Pedro here. I like him by submission. You're actually getting decent number on that. I think the better bet's inside the distance. I like the under here as well. I do think Pedro gets it done relatively easily. As long as he doesn't kind of engage in a brawl with Bukauskas, he should be fine. And I think even if he does, he's the better technical striker, especially defensively. So while Bukauskas, I mean, I like the kid. He's a nice dude. I've listened to a bunch of his interviews, trains with his dad. It's a pretty good story of redemption after that terrible injury he sustained when Khalil Roundtree stomped his knee off his body. But yeah, I'm all over Tyson Pedro here. I think he gets it done fairly easily. Just a really tough assignment on short notice. And Bukauskas, I mean, this is a really tough matchup. Those guys he's fighting over in Cage Warriors, I mean, I respect Chadwick. Campbell's decent, but obviously neither are really on this level. I mean, I'm all over Pedro here.
Yep, completely agree. I think it's a good spot for him. Moving on now, a bit more competitive of a matchup, a pick'em fight actually. Josh Kolobau facing Melzik Bogdasarian. This should be a good one. I'm interested to hear your thoughts here. A matchup between 2 strikers should be going to toe to toe.
Yeah, I mean, this is interesting. Kulabau's better than I think most people give him credit for. This is the first time I actually think he's been kind of respected where he should be on the line. Bagdasarian's the more technical striker, definitely has the credentials. I like what he does at range. A little bit slow in waiting for fights to come to him. We've seen at times a little bit frustrating backing him, but he still gets the volume out there as the fight wears on, landing exactly 6 significant strikes per minute in his UFC tenure. I mean, the thing with Kulabau, I think if he tries to grapple here, he might actually have a clearer path. But he just really hasn't shown that at all at the UFC level. I don't think he's even pursued a takedown. If he has, he's showing a 0% accuracy. So yeah, I mean, if this is a fight that's going to stay on the feet, Bogdasarian's shown a 76% takedown defense. He's shown he can get back to his feet against maybe not better grapplers than Kulabau, but similar grapplers. I think he's the pick for now. But yeah, I do think this fight is a tough one to call. Definitely his fight of the night potential. Should be a 15-minute striking affair, but Bogdasarian's just a better striker. Lands more significant strikes per minute. They both take similar damage. So I'm taking Baghdasaryan here. Not a ton of confidence. Could see spending a little bit more time on it. Baghdasaryan is a southpaw, going to give Kulabau some tough looks as well. But yeah, I do think Kulabau is constantly underrated. And for that reason, I don't want to get too heavy on Melsik here, but I do think he's the side.
Yeah, and Melzik is the pick for me as well. My only concern is this 1 year layoff he's been on. I know he's been recovering from a broken hand these past couple months, but he has a cleaner, better at range than Kolobau is able to. A lot of that is given his kickboxing experience and background. In terms of takedown defense, I mean, we saw him defend takedowns from Denis Bazukov quite well. I think he is going to be able to do so here if Kolobau elects to wrestle. But both these guys have great takedown defense. They should be looking to stand and trade here. Calabao is going to want to make this a brawl, land the bigger shots. He's actually slightly favored if this fight is to go to decision, whereas I would think Baghdasaryan would be, just based on the volume he puts out and the cleaner strikes he tends to land. But yeah, I mean, I see this sort of being a fight. It may be a quiet first round or so, but these two should certainly get into some prolonged exchanges. And well, it's going to be competitive on the feet. I think Baghdasaryan with the higher volume, higher output, higher strike accuracy should be able to get through and land the more meaningful shots against Kolobau in this fight, primarily contested at kickboxing range, where he is the most comfortable. So
yeah,
yeah.
I just want to add one thing. I don't mean to cut you off. I think the one path for Kulabau is maybe to kind of weather that early storm and take over late. We have seen Melsa kind of fade in the later rounds, and Kulabau has excellent cardio. He's super durable. So maybe Melsik is like really trying to get him out of there, and then he kind of gasses like putting damage on him, and then we see Kulabau take over late. I think that's my biggest concern in backing Melsik, but I do think he's the side.
Yep. And should be a good one again. That one has fight of the night potential. As I believe does this next flyweight bout, Clinton Rodriguez taking on Shannon Ross. Shannon Ross, kind of a vet, up there in age. He made it on Dana White's Contender Series, but was not victorious as a minus 250 favorite when he fought Vinicius Salvador. But that, I mean, was a fight of the night style scrap. Those two went back and forth. Ross got dropped a couple of times, but he kept fighting. I mean, he's a dog. He has been hit a lot over the course of his career, and that's why I feel like the odds are where they sit now currently on this matchup. As Rodriguez is going to be the cleaner striker and more efficient off the back foot. If Ross is pressuring forward, trying to, throw high volume per usual here, I see Rodriguez landing the cleaner shots and countering well. Rodriguez is also coming off a loss against CJ Vergara in his last fight. It was a split decision that I think went the wrong way. A lot of people tend to agree that, Rodriguez should have got the nod there. But nonetheless, he was favored. He did not look as well as he, should have in that appearance. So I'm not jumping to back him here. I just think against a chinier opponent in Ross, he should be able to, put his hands on him and get the job done in this spot, likely, scoring a finish if he is to get his hand raised. Ross potentially trying to grapple a bit here, but I really don't see a clear path to victory for him. Just sort of getting, a good winnable fight here on home soil in front of a home crowd, but I think Rodriguez is going to get his hand raised.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm on Rodriguez here. Obviously, the line here kind of suggests most people are. Ross is one of the only guys off Contender Series that got signed coming off a loss. He looked good in that spot until he didn't. Took a ton of damage, ate a lot of shots, eventually got KO'd. Clayton against Vergara. I'm not very high on Vergara as a fighter, but one thing you have to say about him is he is extremely durable. I don't really think Ross has that same durability. I think this fight mostly takes place on the feet. I don't love that he has to fly up from Brazil or wherever he's training at a team with Vergara, Brazil, and Ross is fighting in his backyard. But other than that, there's really no reason to like Ross much here. The one thing I will say, it is a little fishy that the UFC was so adamant about signing this guy. He did get KO'd in his Contender Series fight, took a ton of damage, and I don't know if it was Sean Shelby or Mick Maynard. Maybe Mick Maynard, because he's from around there, isn't he? But they were really like going to bat for this dude. Like, they were telling Dana how great he was. And when Dana gave the contract to Salvador, who we fought, he was saying how high they were on Ross and how Ross was expected to win, how they've been following Ross for a long time. This kid just came in and beat him up. So I don't know. It's a little fishy to me that the UFC is so interested and invested in the Shannon Ross guy. I'm not totally sure why. I think it's just because he's been kind of grinding the regional scene for years and really chasing this opportunity and now finally getting it. Like, it's a good story, but yeah, I mean, outside of that narrative, I mean, Clayton's the more athletic, the more powerful. I think his grappling should hold up enough to keep this fight standing, the more durable. I expect him to win via KO.
Yeah, I think the KO finish is most likely. And yeah, Dana White does not like signing 30-year-olds off the Contender Series. Did on that one occasion. I'm not sure if Ross has too many UFC wins ahead of him, but we will see. The other prelim fight, Jamie Malarkey taking on Francisco Prado in his UFC debut, an undefeated fighter. Prado really hasn't beaten high-level competition. I mean, you go through his most recent fights, it's nobody that solid. He's just 20 years old. I mean, he's one of these kids that's eager to fight, an aggressive fighter, always going to be a benefit in MMA, just being the aggressor, moving forward. But I feel like he's going to have a tough time here matching Malarkey in terms of power and, really struggling to close his 3-inch reach advantage. Malarkey's long and he throws with such heavy hands that as you move in, he really does crack well to the body, to the head. He has a better gas tank too. I think wearing against this kid over the course of a 15-minute fight is going to, ultimately lead to his downfall. The kid's best chance is going to be in the, first 5-10 minutes here. We've seen that, blitzing style work to his advantage, getting wins in all these fights thus far. But they haven't always been impressive or that clean. I think he is going to get touched up by Malarkey here. And I mean, he's just shared the cage with much more solid lightweight opponents, Michael Johnson, Devontae Smith, Conor Worthy, he finished. I think Prado's drawing into a tough test here in Malarkey, who is like a fringe top 20, top 25 lightweight, one of the better divisions in the UFC. So I see Malarkey getting the win here in the spot, but I'm not jumping to back him just with the unknown surrounding this undefeated kid.
Yeah, I'm with you. I like Malarkey here. I do think Prado is going to be dangerous early, like you said. Maybe not for 10 minutes or even 5, but probably for 2 or 3. I mean, the one thing you got to say about a kid like what's his name? Prado, similar to like Bruno Ferrer against Rodriguez, like some of these kids come in with so much confidence. He's undefeated. He's been knocking everybody out. In his mind, he thinks he's going to do that again here. But at the same time, maybe Malarkey was scheduled to fight Hakparas, which would have been a much tougher matchup. They even had him scheduled against Magomed Mustafayev. Like, they obviously think he should be fighting higher level competition. Prado's coming in from a really questionable regional scene in Argentina. I think we saw Eileen Perez come out of that same promotion, who was calling for Amanda Nunes before she got finished immediately by Stephanie Egger. But yeah, I don't really know what to think of this Prado kid. I just haven't been impressed by the level of competition. Like you said, he's shown good power, but it's really against nobodies. And Malarkey, while he has been KO'd at times, like it was Jalen Turner, he's very durable. And if he gets rocked, I think he just starts wrestling, in which case he should have a major advantage. So I'm on Malarkey here. I think he gets it done. Obviously, some questions because Prado is a bit of an unknown and he does seem to have some power, but I think Malarkey's going to know that. He'll mind his P's and Q's, let Prado have his little adrenaline dump, and then probably finish him in the second round. So I like Malarkey to get it done, probably inside the distance. Prado is going to be dangerous early here, so there is value just betting the under in general. But yeah, it's level of competition, and I don't think Malarkey won that fight against Johnson necessarily. Very close fight, but he has been facing much better competition compared to Prado. So the line indicates it. Malarkey's the side here in his backyard.
Yeah, and I don't know the odds. I don't have them in front of me for
I
like
think he's
another
like
two
minus 280. Yeah.
No, under 2.5, something like that. Yeah, but no, I would certainly agree with you on that look too. Just for this particular matchup.
Yep. I'm looking for it now. Hold on.
Yeah.
Under 1.5 is plus 120. Under 2.5, I like better. That's around minus 160, minus 150 most books.
Yeah, I mean you're getting a minus 160 compared to Malarkey straight minus 270. I think that's a great play.
Agreed. Yep.
All right, taking a look now at the early preliminary card. This will start 6 p.m. Your card kicks off. The last early prelim is Jack Jenkins going up against Don Shanis here, featherweight matchup. Jenkins a sizable favorite, minus 360 now, most places. Fighting out of Australia, a pretty highly regarded prospect. I mean, his striking is rather refined. He's got good kicks. He throws in combination well. And then yeah, Sheamus, we saw him get his foray into the UFC, taking on Sadiq Youssef, getting beat up bad inside a minute. I mean, a short notice debut, that's going to happen. But this is another tough fight to draw into in just a second UFC bout here. I mean, I think Jenkins is the higher level fighter, higher level striker. We're going to see over the course of this fight that Jenkins can really switch stances much better than Sheamus is able, and work from both stances. And I see ultimately, if he needs to, mixing in the wrestling as well to get the victory here. This guy Don Sheamus, I know, training out of Massachusetts, Citadel MMA. It's going to be interesting to see what he's able to do in this spot. But again, it's just such a tough draw that I don't think he's going to find much success unless he can make this a really ugly fight. Maybe mix in takedowns of his own. He's got a little wrestling, but it's mostly going to be the hands brawling in close that could get him the victory here. And against a more refined striker, I don't see it going that way.
Yeah, Jenkins moves really well. He has great lateral movement. I think he's going to have the much better footwork here. Jenkins is one of these kids who kind of was raised in MMA, so he's good pretty much everywhere. Solid wrestling, decent BJJ, really good striker. I picked him in his Contender Series fight, and he did win that via KO, but I was definitely a little bit concerned going in just because he was a massive favorite, but the Eternal MMA just hasn't been the best promotion regionally in terms of prospects and their trajectories in the UFC. But I like what I see from the kid. He seems very athletic. Like I said, excellent footwork, good head movement, really sound striker defensively, which I think is important here. Sheamus, he's going to come out firing. He's going to be looking to take his head off, but I think Jenkins could just kind of use that footwork, work around the big cage, and just stay out of trouble, start to pick him apart at range, take him down if he needs to. And he should have him covered pretty much everywhere. So yeah, Don Sheamus fighting at a Cage Titans. That's obviously right in our backyard here in Boston, but I don't know. They haven't really produced many great contenders. So Sheamus is a tough guy, gritty vet, but whenever you're described as tough and gritty, usually that means you're going to have trouble at this level. Like, that shouldn't be your best quality. So kudos to Sheamus for making it to the UFC. Definitely an impressive story there, but I do think he's kind of running into one of these super kids. Like, maybe Jenkins doesn't have the highest trajectory, but I think the UFC is certainly trying to build him here in front of his home crowd.
Yeah, certainly, at least at this point, a lot of featherweights I'd pick against him, but this should be a fight that he's able to get the victory. These odds, I might not get too involved, maybe like an Aussie parlay or something of the sort, but I'm not sure I'm going to be jumping all over it, but I do see him getting his hand raised here.
I agree.
Yeah, we'll move on now. A women's strawweight matchup. Loma Lookboonmee, a minus 280 favorite here against Elise Reed. Reed impressed me last time out. Beating undefeated Mexican prospect Melissa Martinez, who may have been a bit overrated as the large favorite in the spot. Makes me hesitant to bet against her, but Reed overall has been okay in the UFC. I just see in this particular fight, unless she is able to, again get a takedown, control Lookboonmee in this spot, she isn't going to look as good as she did her previous fight on the feet. Lookboonmee just has really good Muay Thai. At range, she's even going to look okay with her technical striking skills. It was just an issue of her size and length that could pose issues if she was trying to spend a long time kickboxing against Elise Reed. But I really see her doing her best work in the clinch up against the cage here, in the pocket, landing the cleaner shots against Elise Reed, fighting out a Tiger Muay Thai. We've seen her have success against UFC strawweights of a similar level. And yeah, I won't be getting involved at odds this wide, but I think it's very justified to see Lookboonmee sitting as the favorite here. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I do think the line's getting a little bit out of hand. We have seen Reed pull off upsets in the past. I do think she's fighting a little above her head, though. Loma, excellent Muay Thai striker, like you said. She's been striking since she was like a toddler, I think. So yeah, no surprise there. I actually learned she was fighting out of Full Metal Dojo, like John Nutt, who puts on Fight Circus. I think that's his gym, or he's involved in the ownership of that gym, and she's been fighting out of there for a while. I found that pretty interesting. But I like Loma a lot here. She's really developed these nice judo throws too. She has those tie trips, so her grappling has improved dramatically. The fights we see her lose are usually against really solid wrestlers like a Lupi Godinez. And yeah, I don't really see that here at all in Elise Reed, who has been mixing in the grappling a bit more. But I mean, Loma's undersized against everyone. I think against Reed, they're actually going to be pretty similar in stature. I like Loma here to win the striking exchanges, pick her apart at range. I wouldn't be shocked if Elise Reed secures a takedown or two, but I don't think she's going to be able to put much damage on Loma when she does. The one concern, I mean, was it Loma's last fight? Where she was dominating. She got a takedown, then she just kind of stood up and walked away with 30 seconds left. Like, it didn't make any sense. So the fight IQ was a little bit of a question mark on Loma here. I don't know what that was. We have seen some questionable decision making from her in the past, but she's landing nearly 2 more significant strikes per minute, absorbing 1 fewer. And yes, near 75% takedown defense. I do think she could keep this fight standing, and she could score a few of those judo throws of her own, really win over the judges here. I think Loma gets it done probably by decision. Reed is pretty tough. I do think it probably goes 15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, and I do see Loma outworking her there. All right, 2 more fights to go. This featherweight scrap, Shane Young taking on Blake Bilder. This is an interesting one. I mean, sitting near pick'em odds, Shane Young, the slight favorite, minus 135, minus 140 some places. Coming off a pretty significant hiatus, back in action here against the oncoming Bilder. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I've never been high on Shane Young. I've always thought he was overrated, and now coming off those 2 losses, I think he's kind of shown that, and as a result, we see the market adjusting. He's a slight favorite here, but at the same time, I mean, Bilder's very rough around the edges. The thing about Blake Bilder, he's going to go after it. He's going to come at Shane. He's going to throw a ton of strikes. He's going to be very aggressive. He does have decent submission ability, so I actually see Bilder as likely the aggressor here, and it's just going to be a matter of Young can kind of keep him off him and keep a sound game plan and keep him at range. So this is a low level fight when I want to kind of spend more time taping. Got money on my mind, I guess. But yeah, I do like Bilder here slightly at underdog odds. I just think he's the more durable fighter. And I think if these guys get into a scrap, he probably comes out on top. We saw in his Contender Series fight, he took a ton of damage and then he pretty much finished the guy in spite of it. I think we could see something similar here. I also know he has a decent wrestling base. Shane Young has shown to struggle against grapplers. And while I wouldn't classify Bilder as a grappler, I do think he could lean on that part of his game here. If he has that solid game plan coming in, he should be able to use that to ground Young and kind of control position as long as he needs to. But yeah, this is another one I want to spend more time on. Shane Young, I do think he's the A side, obviously, in his backyard. This is kind of his last chance. If he loses here, he's probably cut. But yeah, I don't know how good Bilder is yet. We really haven't seen a ton out of him. He did look good in that Contender Series matchup, but he took a ton of damage. So it's always tough with a guy like that. Like, yeah, he's durable. Yeah, he's got power, but is he smart enough to kind of win a 15-minute fight at the UFC level? I'm not sure. So a fight I need to spend more time on, leading with the value on Bilder right now. But yeah, it's not a confident play by any stretch.
Yeah, and I echo a lot of what you said. My notes: Blake Bilder, more explosive, make it a scrap. He wants to make it ugly. He wants to get in sort of a dogfight here with Shane Young, and I think he's certainly live at the dog number. I'm still not entirely decided on this one. I do want to look a bit deeper myself. Shane Young has faced a higher level of competition, and you could sort of give him a pass with the loss to Ludovic Klein on short notice, stepping in there. And then, I mean, the last time out against Morales was not the worst loss I've ever seen. So I think he certainly could be just the more well-rounded, higher level fighter of these two. But that's not to say Bilder's not going to be live or even get him out of there in this spot. So it's one I'm not certain on to this point either, but I certainly don't think Bilder is a bad play whatsoever at these odds.
Yeah, and I will just say the 2 wins Young has, Arnett and Dye, 2 guys that have been cut from the UFC roster. So this is kind of a winner go home situation for him here. And yeah, home isn't a far trip away as they're fighting in Australia.
He needs it. He needs it after some time off. And I mean, with a Bilder, a fast starter too, that could play a factor. Some ring rust getting back in there first time in 2 years, I think.
Definitely.
All right, and last one. Been great breaking down the card here. This fight at lightweight, Zubaira Tukhugov taking on Elvis Brenner on short notice. A late replacement for Joel Alvarez. That would have been a good fight, seeing him face Zubaira Tukhugov, but one where Tukhugov is likely going to rely on the wrestling to get a victory, and he could again look that way in this matchup against Brenner. This is Brenner stepping up in short notice, taking the opportunity, but facing a very tough test in Tukhugov. Well, Tukhugov's never, a fighter you want to jump the bet on. He's always a bit volatile. This should be a matchup where he's going to find success. Now moving up from featherweight to lightweight, won't have to worry about the weight cut nearly as much as has been the case for Tukhugov in the past. And he's going to look better than Brenner in this fight, both on the feet and if he elects to, go for the takedowns, as was likely the plan, training for a fight camp against Joel Alvarez. This is also a bit of a grudge match. I mean, Brenner stepping up, just Charles Oliveira camp, going up against the Islam Makhachev camp, fighting on the Islam Makhachev undercard. I think Tukhugov has a great chance at getting the win here as a sizable favorite. And yeah, I just think short notice, it's a tough draw for Brenner, his way into the UFC. But I see Tukhugov getting an early finish here, first or second round, putting his hands on him.
Yeah, I don't know if it's Tukhugov or Tukhugov. I don't know if you're pronouncing it right. I don't know that I am either, though, so I won't really check you on that. But yeah, Zubaira is the play here. And you got to think he's had a camp for Joel Alvarez, who's obviously an excellent submission grappler. Brenner's one real path to victory is probably via submission. I don't agree that Tukhugov is going to lean on his wrestling as much, though. He's actually one of the better strikers out of that Khabib camp. I think he could mostly keep this fight standing, pick him apart at range, land the better strikes. We saw him outstriking Ricardo Ramos his last time out, then mixing in the grappling. I think we see a similar situation here. Wouldn't be surprised if he finished Brenner. There's just really nothing about Brenner that's been all that impressive. He has a few wins by submission, but they're all against nobody. So I like Tukhugov here. He's a massive favorite. I think you could tie him into all your parlays, and if he loses, just rebuild because it's the first fight on the card. But I'd be very, very surprised to see him drop this one. Yeah, I think he rolls, and obviously he's been in camp with Islam this whole time. They've been up swimming in ice water in Dagestan, and yeah, he's going to be at his best level for sure. So I think he rolls here. He's been preparing for Alvarez, who's pretty much Brenner if he was really, really good. So I like Tukhugov here by a wide margin.
Yeah, I agree. I think a lot of similarities on this card. Still a few fights for us to pick. As always, you can check out our full write-up and breakdown of these fights on Dine Sports come Saturday morning. We appreciate everyone tuning in for this breakdown of UFC 284. Early in the week here, it's going to be a great fight week, and looking forward to this card come Saturday. Nick, as always, thanks for breaking it down with me.
Of course, man. Looking forward to it. Good luck, everyone.